On behalf of Anima Mundi, and to coincide with Luke Hannam's first solo exhibition at the gallery, I'm delighted to introduce the artist himself in conversation with Richard Davey. With Luke Hannam describes his work as a result of an ordered chaos where poetic paintings are made in the eye of the storm. Richard Davey is an internationally published author, curator, and member of the International Association of Art Critics. He was a judge at the John Moores Painting Prize in 2016 and has written prolifically for many major exhibition publications, including for Anselm Kiefer's solo exhibition at the Royal Academy of Arts in 2014 and the RA Summer Exhibition catalogues from 2014 to 17. So without further ado, I'm delighted to introduce Luke and Richard.
Hi, Richard.
Hi.
Here we go.
Just about a year ago, we started to talk, didn't we?
Yeah. We did.
So I was kind of trawling on Instagram and there were these drawings appeared that I just was blown away by, these amazing, stunning line drawings, which kind of echoed the fluidity and the kind of just confidence of Picasso or Rembrandt. And not to embarrass you, Luke, but it had that kind of feeling for me. And I was blown away by them. And there was there were images which resonated with all the things which intrigue me and I respond to in art. So I just reached out and we started talking. And I think it was a day after you'd had a conversation with somebody who was actually saying, why are you doing these drawings? And kind of, they're too romantic. And I remember saying, well, I don't see it like that. And we've just been having these conversations ever since. And that's what's informed the catalogue and that's what's informed our friendship.
It's interesting that you bring that up. I do remember the sort of struggle I was going through on the day when I spoke to you, but it's a struggle that's reoccurred many, many times to do with the issue of my drawings. I mean, the fact that I say it's an issue is a point to make. It's sort of, a lot of people have commented. I mean, firstly, thank you for your kind words. I mean, they're lovely things to hear, and I do love, obviously, both of those artists. We'll discuss that later. But my drawings, I always feel, expose something, as all work should, but they expose something in me that has caused confusion in others, and therefore, and sometimes causes confusion in me when I see people are confused. I think the first thing that confuses people is that they are instantly attracted to them, but they then feel that they're sort of out of time or from another time or not connected to ideas about what modern drawing should do, that they appear to be, well, I think that's where the confusion starts. People always ask me questions, you know, how do you go about making these drawings? What's the relationship between drawings and the paintings? Because in the past, certainly, there was a strange disconnect between the two. And the drawings are a key part of what makes the Compass and Rosary kind of tick, and also explain something in our relationship, because you help me understand the drawing. So I think the way I'll go with this, to stop confusing anybody, is the drawings represent a very intimate part of my imagination. So much so that I don't even think I really consciously think about it like that. I just associate the act of drawing as a very pure way of exploring ideas and laying things down. And I think because it is a very intimate thing, in the past, perhaps I've wanted to close the door on it once I've done them. I've not wanted to accept what's going on in the drawing. I mean, I remember the conversation with you. I remember thinking, oh, maybe this is going to go the same way. You know, this is going to form another bit of confusion between my painting and my drawing. But you settled my nerves very quickly, actually. And I realized that through talking to you that I was going to understand something. I was desperately trying to understand myself. What was this intimacy in drawing that perhaps wasn't coming through in the painting? I think the painting was really intense and wild and heavy, sort of painterly processes, but it didn't have this lightness of touch that my drawings have always had that quality.
You had one of those moments of revelation, which seems to happen quite often with us, where I suddenly realised that the drawings are almost like prophetic voices, and you've talked about them being things which emerge out of this really vivid dream state that you have, and where dreams are not just a kind of hazy recollection, but very vivid and real. And it resonated for me with ideas which I've long thought about around the sublime and beauty, and the distinction which philosophy just can't cope with, and yet art seems to deal with so beautifully. It's kind of the sublime is this formless, intangible space, and yet which is the reality around us. We live in a world of an ocean of atoms where we are, as it were, momentary coalescences of those atoms into a moment of beauty, as it were, into a moment of form, which is also in that same moment evaporating and decoalescing. And the paintings seem to capture the kind of vibe, the kind of, not just the vibrancy, but the violence and the kind of that oceanic tidal flow of atoms, where it's that kind of sense of void, and the drawings are a still point. They're kind of a moment of beauty.
And there definitely was a discord happening between drawing and painting. Something strange was going on, and it was definitely something that I needed to talk about with somebody.
Yeah.
It just so happened it was you.
It was me.
I must just say something else about the beginnings of our relationship that's gone on through the year that I found really interesting, is that you're very provocative, you're gentle, you're careful, you're respectful, but you're also challenging. You've asked provocative questions, and I remember one of the early ones that really felt like a ball bearing banging around in my mind for many weeks after. I tried to tell you, I tried to sort of come up with a defense, if you like, why the drawings were different to the paintings. And as I recollect, what I said was the drawings were starting points, and I just improvised. Once I'd done the drawing, I just wanted to jump off from that and improvise and go wherever I liked. Now, that was certainly true of what I did, but you said to me, and I don't know if you remember saying it, you said, no, I don't accept that. You are leaving something behind. You said you're leaving something behind. You may be improvising away from it, but you are departing from something which has something which you're not owning up to somehow. You're not accepting. You're too quick to push it to the side. And now I realize a year later, all the things I was pushing to the side were the intimacies, the delicacies, the spiritual journey of myself. I was in denial, and you were definitely not going to accept my version of events at that point, and that was very interesting.
Yes, it's interesting for me. I don't remember that first conversation.
But do you remember that conversation?
I do remember that, and I remember this feeling I have, and why I'm bringing up now is because I think the paintings in this show just fill me with joy, because I see a sense of you are. It's as though you are inhabiting them rather than, and inhabiting them fully. Previously, I can remember looking at them and thinking, these are just there to kind of almost points of, physical assault on the canvas. And here, they're not. It's as though you are allowing the void. You're allowing into this space of stability. You're allowing and coalescence of form. You're allowing a glimpse through into a completely different space. So it's, instead of it being, pigment and matter crashing onto canvas, you're opening up space, and the lines you use, the lines you use to delineate forms are kind of ruptures in that space.
The things that you're talking about, sort of metaphysical things in the sense about space and how materiality works and all those sort of things, how the nature of things is. What is the nature of things? I was looking for a language that would do it, and the drawings, I sort of knew drawings were revealing a way, but I didn't think that I could paint like that. Whenever I started to paint like that, I thought they were too much like drawings. I always thought painting should be something else, and the revelation was that drawings, that I could draw with paintings. I could bring the drawing in as a much bigger part of it. But for some reason, someone must have taught me somewhere, drawings come first, paintings come second. Someone must have put that in my head, because it was a hard code to break. But when it did break, I found myself tumbling effortlessly and with deep joy into a world where I was in my own realm. Suddenly, I read in a domain, in a place that, I don't know, that probably sounds lofty, but it was like waking up in a world where I could suddenly do all the things I wanted to do. And the painting Heavenly Bodies is that place. I mean, it's a sort of representation of paradise in a sense, in one way, but it's also a painting about me waking up quite literally in another world where it's okay to depict it the way I feel it. That Heavenly Bodies is all, when you get close to Heavenly Bodies, it's a big painting. There's so much bare canvas on it. There's so many things that I didn't think I should do, Some of it's just the faintest line, the faintest brushstroke. It's the smallest amount of touch to create this image. And that's how I draw. When I'm drawing, I use so many very delicate processes and really light touches with pencils. But suddenly I'd found a way of painting that had the same tenderness in a way, that the lightness of touch, that was the world I woke up in. And then once I started to make that discovery and accept that I could make a painting like that, it was sort of lift-off time. I just wanted to explore this.
I've written about and thought about this idea of the kind of atomic ocean is one of the things I looked at with the Anselm Kiefer essay for the Royal Academy. This idea that around our solid matter is the same matter, but disassembled, as it were, kind of not connected into a solid form. Mm. And you kind of think of it all nice and neatly, kind of evenly spaced, and yet the reality is it isn't. You think of photons, the waves of light which travel from the sun, they have different wavelengths, so they're traveling and the curves are different. The speed is different. It isn't a stable place. And in a sense, the more I think about your work, it shows that instability of the intangible world. But and one of the things which scientists have talked about, and I just resonate with and think's fascinating, is the idea of atoms are by their very nature loving, that they are constantly wanting to connect, but at the same time, as soon as they connect, there's that sense of then they're being pulled apart, and we as human beings, every 7 years, we're a completely different set of cells and atoms. But coming out of Atomic Talk, I think one of the things which you were reaching towards just now is this sense of this unique realm that your paintings and drawings inhabit. And in a sense, you've talked about it coming from your dreams, but it seems it's more than dreams, because I suppose it is dreams, but it's also memories, your actual world of the lyricist, the musician, the Heavenly Bodies, that sense of faith and spirituality, which is there and important, in your life. The sailor, the kind of the worlds you inhabit, the kind of the landscapes, they're more than dreams. It's also somehow finding. I thought it was really interesting what you said about about the notion of paradise, that it's as though you're finding and looking for paradise here on earth, not in ideal forms, but in the world you inhabit, in its beauty, in its ugliness, in its reality, in its mess, in its in its wonder and amazement. And so whilst they seem to be very personal kind of riffs or very personal poetic images, once you start to just even lightly scratch the surface, you realize they're about lived experience and living in the world, not just in a dream world.
I often try to work out where the sort of center of the subject matter is. What is the thing? What is this all about? All of it, you know, what is the thing that it's all about? And well, it's something I'm always pondering, but I think something connects to the things that you're saying, certainly at the beginning of what you were saying just then. I think this unbinding, a sort of releasing from bonds and restraints, trying to find a way of breaking away from how things are supposed to be and trying to find a way of expressing it as how you perceive it. I don't know if that makes sense. I mean, a lot of things in the way I talk, you know, when you try to vocalize the voice in your head, you realize why you paint in some ways. It's full of riddles and mysteries and strange thoughts. But this, for me, links on to two other things. Words like visionary and romantic and, or certainly prophetic and things like that. And they're interesting words. And I think about the visionary thing quite a lot, because I think this connects to what I'm going to try and say about unbinding, is that when people think of prophecy or a visionary, they think, I sort of believe people start thinking about people who see into the future or somehow might make a statement about destiny or where we're all going. But I think one of the things that I feel about those words and those ideas, it's not about seeing the future, but actually seeing how the present is. So the prophecy is the sort of trying to depict the unthinkable. And the unthinkable, in this case, is that things aren't as they seem. And that reality is actually more, as you were talking about photons and atomization, that the sensible idea of reality doesn't exist. The unimaginable reality is that it's all floating particles. It's all fusing and unfusing and unbinding and moving. And it's a terrifying thing to realize. But the prophecy, if you like, or the visionary nature, if I'm allowed to talk about those things in relation to myself without it sounding pompous, is that I'm trying to see, and even then I'm apologizing for something, I'm expressing something I feel about reality, which is that it's unimaginably not as we think it is, that it is more amorphous, fluid. And that is the way the way I'm painting relates to that, this sort of coming apartness. And just to connect it, if I can make sense of this, to the drawings, you made some great points earlier on and last year about the way the drawings seem to float in the gas, in a sort of space of their own, sort of their own universe of gases inside the paper. You know, the smudges and the marks were all kind of, if you wanted to look at them, you could, in a certain way, you could see them as mini universe. With, like, the knots were left untied, the buttons were left unfastened, and things were just assembled for a fragment of time, enough for you to say that's a this or this is a that.
Yeah.
But if the drawing could move, the drawing would suddenly turn into something else.
I really love what you're saying about prophecy and vision, and in a sense, I think it's about how things not ought to be, but as you say, if you have other eyes, you might realize this is how things really are. And it's interesting that one of the images which is becoming a recurrent image is that of one of the great biblical prophets, Elijah. And again, it's this sense, you know, at the heart of the story which, you know, you and I talked about, and I kind of spoke about with you, was the wonderful story of Elijah fleeing from Jezebel, and after killing the prophets of Baal, and ending up in a cave. And this cave is on the mountain where Moses received the tablets of stone, you know, the law. And he goes out looking for the voice of God and expects to see it in thunder and lightning and so on. And instead, he finds it in a still small voice. And it seemed to me that that also captures something of the paintings and the drawings. The kind of the still small voice of the drawings.
Exactly.
Was
It's all coming back.
with him. And the paintings, the kind of clash where it's present, but in just a very different way. It's as though the voice hasn't come, and you can go back to the account in the book of Genesis of, you know, at the very beginning, verse 1 of Genesis, called the void, which is just this vast, intangible formlessness in which everything is potentially there, like photons of light, which contain the potential for color, but it isn't yet seen. And in this void, something out of this void is this voice, and it's a silent voice saying, "Let there be light." And in a sense, it pierces formlessness and gives order. And in a sense, this comes back to the notion of the title of the show, The Compass and the Rosary, doesn't it? Of this kind of, that as human beings, we're always looking for order, and yet the order comes out of mystery.
Just to mention The Compass and the Rosary, I've been remembering the hot summer day when I started work on that painting with an enormous amount of energy and focus. And when I recollect back, it's the kind of state of mind you dream of, where everything comes together, everything, the energy, the ideas. And I remember working very quickly and knowing where I wanted to put everything. But the painting is about, well, exactly the things that you're talking about. But what I'm actually depicting is me trying to put this into narrative form. So you have, hopefully the painting will be visible when I'm describing this, but on the left-hand side, they're on a boat. So the situation is a ship, which in itself is a metaphor for the void. The ship, if you like, is the earth we walk on. It's the bit we can just about hold together that floats in the void of the ocean. But you have the songwriter on the left doing what songwriters do, trying to internalize and trying to express through music the desperation of the void life. You have a man lying asleep on the deck, deciding to confront the void by dreaming. You have the older person in the middle, the older man, holding the wheel of the ship. I suppose this is rationalism, this idea that you steer your course, know where you're going. It doesn't matter how rough the seas or wild the storms become. As long as you hold the wheel of rationality, the ship will go where you want it to go. And then you have the young man at the front kissing the rosary. And obviously that depicts faith and a whole spiritual approach to the void, And the whole painting is constructed around, they're in a cross form. If you sort of stand back from it, you'll see the whole thing is in cross, in the form of the mast and the way the figures are laid out. And, it arrived from a series of drawings, but it made its way into a painting in a way that I was totally happy with. And I don't say that very often. And I'm still happy with it today. Proud that it's something so immense in the feelings that go into that painting, the confusions on many levels, that it holds together, and that somehow I have just made something I dream. Maybe all painters dream of creating the form, not by limiting or reducing the awareness of the void and the enormity of things, but you manage to find a conclusion that doesn't lock things down, but it also helps you understand things, but it doesn't reduce them. It's retained its poetry. It can be expansive and outward looking, or it can. I'm pleased with that, and yes, it is that's why the show is named, because it's all of those elements, perhaps in certainly in relationship to each other, probably in some kind of tension, with each other. It's all me, in a sense that maybe it's like all of us, partly hoping for the best and dreaming, partly making art and hoping I can depict something, partly trying to hold the wheel. This is the experience, isn't it? This is the entanglement of it all.
The thing about a rosary is it's a repeated prayer. It isn't just a single prayer. It's one of the things where, you know, it's the same as I, you know, have in my other role as an Anglican priest. The kind of saying of the Psalms, you know, day in, day out, they just inhabit you. And one of the things about your work is that, you know, you don't have lots of subjects that you're looking at. There are, as it built up over time because you work so prolifically, but suddenly there will be, you know, I don't think it's necessarily an exaggeration. There could be, you know, 50 to 100 drawings of the same subject looked at from all these different angles. A bit like the rosary, it's somehow the repetition takes you into that space where you come into a deeper knowledge of a subject. It isn't, and it's not just about, you know, kind of doing it on an artistic level of let's try it a different way, let's try it that way or that way. It's as though it's like muscle memory. You just do it over and over again. It inhabits you, so you see it differently each time. It's about, not about how do I make it differently, but how do I see this subject differently? Because I'm making it again and again, and I'm making it again and again, backwards and forwards between drawing and painting, drawing and painting, drawing and painting, of Elijah, of the figure of Ascension, the kind of the poet, you know, like the one behind you, this kind of poetic figure, the lyricist, you know, these forms which are just there again and again. And sometimes they knock in and out of different series that, you know, you'll see this figure with the guitar in the boat or on the landscape. And it's as though they just kind of, that freedom of the muscle memory allows them to just inhabit this world you're creating.
Something that just to add to this, the lyricist, certainly at painting, and I think maybe this happens a lot. It certainly happens when I depict musical situations. The lyricist is deliberately called, well, of course it's deliberately called the lyricist, but the lyric in music is a strange thing. Musicians will know this, watching this, that there are long conversations about the meaning of instrumental music in relation to the meaning of music with lyrics, the use of vocalization, so vocal noises as opposed to words, that the lyricist provides the vocalization and also the words. It often comes to music in a very different way to the way the harmony and the melody and the composition is created. They're often created by different people. So for instance, if you were to take the Beatles as an example, just a quick example, Lennon and McCartney would share roles, but the roles would, if you see one of them might write the words, one of them might write the music, that these things can be disjointed and separate. And that's an important sort of metaphor for me, that the lyricist isn't the person doing all of it. They're trying to find the words to describe the feeling of it. But it's really hard writing lyrics. Lyrics are strange things over music. They're not like poetry because they're with music. They're words with accompaniment. They're words in a context of sound. They work differently. There are many, many songs written where one word is used throughout the song repetitively, and yet you never get bored of hearing it because the context changes as the harmony develops. So this musical sensibility is very much within me. When you talk about things like muscular memory, doing things repeatedly over and over again, this chant-like quality, it directly relates to the musical side of myself, where by saying the thing ritualistically over and over again, I create an evocation, or I create a spell or a trance state, or something begins to happen. And this is where it depends what you want to name these things as. I'm very happy and open to describe these things as spiritual experiences. I'm happy to explore them as neurological experiences. None of that bothers me. I'm free from any of the prejudice of how anyone wants to describe anything. None of that bothers me. All these things fascinate me, to do with the way meaning is created, but the chant, if you like, first of all, has to push out the noise, chaos, and try and foreground something that coalesces in the sort of maelstrom of the chant. If you like. It's like
that's such an interesting way of thinking about it.
So I work like this. I like when weirdly, when I was at art school, I don't know why, but it must have been when I was at art school, which is a long time ago. The word practice wasn't used, or I wasn't listening, but people didn't talk about their practice as if it was somehow different to somebody else's. There was just drawing and painting, and we would often be in a room together doing both of those things together and talking about them. And the word practice had much more resonance to me as a musician. That practice was something you did for 2 hours a day to get better and to inhabit a sensibility, the muscular memory thing, to actually put it into the neurofibers of your body so you could remember it and do it. But the idea that I had my own private practice, music is a universal sort of language, and I come to painting definitely looking for universality and not for my own anything. I'm trying to find something beyond my own. When I was talking right at the beginning of this conversation about the fear of the intimacy in my drawing, that's equivalent to the lyrics in songwriting, in the sense that I was fearful of exposing what I was really thinking or really feeling, and that by taking paintings into a more painterly direction, I didn't have to add or expose other ideas about what I was feeling and thinking. And I think what's happened in these paintings is that, for instance, I've depicted Elijah, I've depicted Lazarus, I've depicted a person playing the guitar. May seem like some are very grand subjects, maybe some seem quite simple, almost maybe banal, I don't know, but they're specific. And this is also something that's been very important to me, because when I stay focused on, when I stay deliberately close to the idea, don't abandon the idea through a fear of being seen holding the idea. It's like I'm taking responsibility for the idea and trying to express it as clearly as I can, which I don't think I did before. I think I obfuscated through paint things. And I think what will happen more with the paintings, more what's going to happen, I feel, is that through line is like the word. Line is decipherable. Line is clear.
Well, my wife works for a youth arts organisation, and they have a recording studio and they have bands. And their bands you listen to, the kind of the guys they work with, it's all kind of punk and very heavy metal. And I go into the concerts and I come out, I'm an old man now. I come out, I can't hear a thing. I can't, and I cannot hear the lyrics. And I'm looking at these people who are singing all the lyrics, and I'm going, I can't hear them. And the feeling is it's about a physical force of the vibration of the noise. Kind of bang, through it's music as physical experience.
I think what you should say to that doesn't matter. That's fine.
No, it's wonderful.
But it wasn't doing enough.
Lyrics. And when you hear these songs, I think of a particular band, I won't say who it is, but a really great band. But the lyrics are incredibly powerful. But you can only hear them on acoustic, when played acoustically. But when you do, you realize, oh my goodness, there are these lyrics which have poetry, which are taking me to a completely different place. It's not about the physical experience of, kind of the body vibrating and kind of almost being, torn from the inside out because of the volume, and which is a very, visceral experience. And then you get these lyrics, and there's something about the way that line can allow poetry, allow you to hear. But more importantly, and this is what I love about your drawings, and it's coming through in the paintings now, is we forget that line isn't just about telling a story. You don't just take a line for a walk and create an outline which tells a story. Those lines have their own poetry to them. There'll be little curves, there'll be little kind of shadings, little hatchings. And those hatchings can communicate embodied motion and embodied beings. You know, you kind of a curve. We forget that the first curve we see is our mother smiling to us when we come out of the womb. It is inherently about joy, and yet we forget that because so often we think of a curve as just part of an outline. We don't necessarily associate it with joy. We don't associate it with sadness. We don't associate a downward curve. We don't, you know, you think of doodling on the phone and somebody's annoying you and you suddenly look down and the lines you're making are jagged and kind of angular, and, you know, because our body is on edge, it's full of energy. It's energy which, you know, the energy you use to make a curve is long and lyrical and flowing. It's a totally different energy to that which makes a short stabbing mark. And we forget that, and yet your paintings have all of those qualities in them, plus the narrative. And that's what I love about them. And they're not just here as an outline creating this beautiful narrative. It's, I'm giving you, it's like a medieval manuscript where you have the text in proper script, but between the lines you have the kind of the Anglo-Saxon, you know, almost handwriting of the commentary. And the lines, the way you use lines, offer that commentary about the bigger subject matter which those lines are delineating and forming and outlining.
It reminds me of another part of our conversation that we had quite early on about line, connected, very similar to things that you were saying now. And we were talking about space and the way, something I'm really interested in about lines. And I remember when I was quite young, you know, a boy scribbling on paper and loving the way a scribble didn't look flat to me. As soon as the lines crisscrossed over each other, it looked like a ball of string. It looked three-dimensional. I was fascinated by the magical quality of drawing, that just by sending one line over the top of the other, it didn't matter how you did it, scribble, it became three-dimensional. And what I want to say about this, and I don't know if this will make sense, it's another strange riddle in my mind, I feel I want to say it, is that it's another thing about the rules of painting, is that I encountered this kind of dogma that paintings in the modern world should accept the flatness of the canvas. The abstract painting was about accepting the truth and the nature of this plane. That's why you don't have horizon lines, you don't have illusional space, you have pictorial space. And I get it, I'm fascinated by that as well, the tension from here to here, from there to there, crisscrossing across the canvas. Yes, I understand that. But something else that I didn't want to deny, and it was a very important part of me, that I did sense an horizon line. I did sense a space, and it wasn't, well, it might be an illusion, but not in the sense that painters often talk about illusionary space, you know, we don't want it to have illusionary space, it needs to have pictorial space. I wanted to connect to this space, you know, this feeling of space. And quite a lot of the paintings have the horizon in them, with figures in a landscape. And it's in a lot of my work. And it's important for me, this space, because it's in the drawings as well, this need to create a world within a world. And it's quite a childlike thing, that thing, to want to depict. I definitely was deliberately trying to get away from the very sophisticated way of thinking about painterly or pictorial space. I wanted to go into, and I think this is why the drawings often look like they're from another time, is that I deliberately play around with illusionistic space and worlds and realms and domains. And there are figures that are really tiny in the distance. And there is, yes, that is a road winding its way to the horizon. And these are poetic metaphors in a sense for something about reality, is that things, do you remember that conversation we were having about things being far away and things being close, and how things come into your time and out of your time? Like if you see a little figure on the other side of the hill, they haven't seen you, you've seen them. Do you exist to them? They exist to you.
But it's more than that, because, you know, and I want to come back to the lyricist behind you after what you said, but it's that what we forget is that we look up into the stars and we see a pinprick of light and we sing it, in that instant, the photon that's come from that star comes in. But that in that moment, we are crossing billions of years. And it's that same thing of, in a painting, you are concertinaing time and space. You're bringing it all into one, and yet you're also expanding it. And it's like, coming back to the painting behind you, the Lewis's, there's something just phenomenal about the way that you look at this figure, and this figure seems solid, and then you look at the bottom, his bottom, and he blurs and blends in with the landscape, and he loses any sense of solidity. And then you look at the black marks, and it goes back to what you're saying about the space. Those black marks that on one level appear solid on the surface of the canvas, taking Greenbergian idea of, it's all about the surface of the canvas. And yet I cannot help but look in, and it's like a black hole that's pulling me through into a fourth dimension, through that painted surface into another world. So you've got, the figure existing both as solid figure and as intangible. You've got beauty and the sublime in that single figure of form and formlessness kind of coalescing. It's that moment that fascinates me, where a photon of light becomes color in the brain, and that impossible line, that impossible moment where it kind of hovers, and it's both a photon and color. And or the split between 2 and 3 dimensions, that it's like those famous drawings of the rabbit and the duck, and the rabbit's head and the duck's beak. Can you actually find that moment when you can see both? You can't, but I just want to get, you're bringing me as close as possible to trying to see both spaces in one moment, to seeing him as a solid form and as melting, to kind of steal Marx's idea, all this solid melts into it, that kind of idea of, the solidity of our forms. You are showing me the reality of this world, that we are both solid and we are melting into reality. And you've got a solid ground which is melting into a fourth space.
The best things happen for me now when I don't think of painting and drawing as separate at all.
Yeah.
And I just approach them as picture making, and I try to use whatever I need to use to try and be as true to the feeling as I possibly can, and the kind of confessional, not trying to dress it up necessarily as painterly language, or it's trying to sort of say it as I feel it. And I've definitely felt liberated for the first time from, or unshackled from, the orthodoxy of modernist painting, which I really was feeling trapped by. I remember going to see the Picasso show at the Royal Academy, and we have spoken about this. I can't remember when that was. It was a few years ago, wasn't it? It was a magnificent,
a couple of years ago, yeah.
Magnificent chronology of his work, and it was sort of laid out quite chronologically. But I remember saying to you that the first 2 rooms had such a profound effect on me. And the first 2 rooms at the Picasso show were mainly drawings, and they were so intimate. They were Picasso, in one way, showing his unbelievable facility to draw like a classical master, or to draw like anyone. They were full of facility, full of owning up to his unbelievable skills, draftsmanship, and control of line. And some of them were tiny, such modest sizes, but exquisite drawings. And then when the room 1, room 2 was like that, and room 3, as I remember, hit you in the face, because it was the shift to cubism. And I remember saying to you, in no way would I be foolish enough to deny the importance of cubism. But it was almost like I looked at it the day I went twice, but I think one of those days, I looked at cubism, I suddenly felt cubism, although a huge leap forward in visual thinking, was also a dislocation from some kind of delicate human experience, some sort of simplicity. I don't know what words to use. I don't want to get into trouble in a way with the art police, but it was like some sudden sort of cataclysm of form is now more important than anything
Well,
else.
is it that, in a sense, that's bringing us back full circle, what you just said, and in a sense, perhaps is a good place to stop. Of that, you know, because we know we could go on for hours chatting, you know. But it seems to me that, you know, the beginning we talked about, when we first started talking, that there was this disconnect between you and drawing, and between your drawings and paintings, and now a year on, that's, you know, you are in a totally different place. That drawing and painting now are in this beautiful lyrical kind of, they're enwrapped with each other, and the work is just majestic because of that. So Luke, thank you so much for just a wonderful conversation. It's, as ever, just been, you know, and it will, I know they will continue, but it's been wonderful sharing that conversation with the people, you know, who might drop in and watch, who are going to see the show Anna Monday, which is just a wonderful show.
Thank you, Richard, and thanks for the time to have the conversation. It was wonderful, and just like all other conversations, I'm going to leave this conversation with my mind and my imagination exploding again. So thank you for that. Wonderful.
A real pleasure.
Thank you both so much for that journey. Such a engaging and deep exchange, and the line has found its beginning again. So yeah, thank you both so much.
Thanks, Jamie.
Real pleasure, Jamie.
Yeah, and hopefully many of those watching will be able to welcome to the gallery. We're open again finally. I'm delighted to be so from the 12th of April. And the Compass and the Rosary is in the gallery until the 22nd of May. So yeah, hopefully we can see many here. Yeah, okay, many thanks.